Red Door House, read by Isabel Gray. Otherwise ordinary, Stay Awhile consisted of sprawling plains bordered by a dense wood. Stretches of dirt road mazed around the neighboring houses, leading to Main Street. Stay Awhile Chapel surveyed the shops and dared heresy. Calvin Moore was the sheriff during the events surrounding Cole Emmeline's death. Late one Saturday evening, an anonymous phone call told of a tragedy near McMartin Forest. "A white Ford F-150 turned down real fast," a woman said. "Say the name of that street again," Sheriff Moore responded. "I said it quite plain, Sheriff." "You seem familiar with Roland Road." "Everyone in town is." "I'm sure you're aware of the youth who stake out Red Door House for their watering hole?" "Red Door is abandoned. I only go there to tell the kids to finish their blue ribbons and piss on their bonfires before they draw attention. You don't sound like a rowdy teen, though, miss." "I know you don't want trouble, Sheriff," the woman continued, "but another death has already happened. We wouldn't want any more scandal to grace a former serial killer's house, now would we?" "Who is this?" Moore asked. "You'll know me soon enough," the woman said. The line went dead. On the scene, it surprised Moore to see Cole's truck stripped of its stainless steel testicle ornament. Giant wheels doubled the vehicle's height, complete with rude decals like a treble hook seating a big busted mermaid. Jasper Cooney sat in the back of Deputy Aaron Wright's RMP. The teen followed Cole to gain popularity from association. His legs bobbed nervously out the back of Wright's cab. "We were going to have a few beers at Red Door," Jasper explained. "You already said that, Cooney," Wright said. She cradled her memo pad in crossed arms. They were getting nowhere. "Tell the sheriff what happened," she continued. Jasper's wide eyes shifted like a tennis match from Wright to the sheet of printer paper he held. His thumbs and index finger bent dog ears into the paper's upper corners. "I called 911 on Cole's phone after the crash. Me and him were going to hang out at Red Door, despite the frequent warnings we have given them in the past," the deputy said. "Right," Moore said sternly. He claimed that Cole acted strangely, driving erratically and slipping in and out of a depressed mood. "He said he broke up with his girlfriend," Jasper said. "That would have been nice to know," Wright said. She made a note. "There was this note in his back pocket when he picked me up," Jasper said. "I saw it because he got out of the car to take a leak." "You told me the note was in the cup holder on your way here," Wright said. "A note that you refused to let me see." "Lord, Deputy, would you be able to get your answer straight if you saw something like that?" "Hey now," Moore said. Wright unfolded her arms and quickly scanned her report. Her gaze shifted, giving a telling look to Jasper before she turned to Moore. A siren blared in the distance, accompanied by the faint revolving lights of an ambulance. "He seemed out of it. Said we should go and start a fire in the empty pool at Red Door. He wanted to burn some of his girl's things. As soon as we got to Roland Road, he changed. Jaw all tight, knuckles white on the wheel." "You said you had your seatbelt on?" Wright asked. "Yes, ma'am," Jasper said, not meeting her gaze. Deputy Wright visually repressed her irritation. Her stare bore into the paper Jasper held. "But this was a suicide attempt, wasn't it?" Wright asked. "I don't see how, unless—" Moore started. "There was a note, Sheriff." The ambulance arrived as Jasper handed Moore the printer paper. Wright's knuckles whitened as she gripped her clipboard tighter, nostrils flared. The letter was typed in red ink, nearly illegible in the emergency lighting. Folded several times, the font abraded in the creases. "You have the gift, not me. Hope you can handle what I left behind. I love you." Moore puzzled over the note as Wright looked over his shoulder. Technicians filed out of the ambulance and examined Jasper. Moore left them, note in hand, and approached the crash. The pickup impacted one of the trees lining the road in front of Red Door House. Cole Emmeline's body sprawled on the hood, neck at an unnatural angle. Windshield glass sprinkled the paint job, prisming the blue and red lights. Cracks like spiderwebs splintered the shattered opening where Cole's torso was caught. A ring of blood stained around the waist of his undershirt as the windshield pierced into him. EMTs freed Cole's body as Sheriff Moore returned to Wright. "Take Jasper home," he said. Wright stared. "But, sir, he needs to be questioned further. Morning. We'll bring him back when the sun is up. I shouldn't have to remind you that Cooney is a minor. We can't question him until his folks are present. I'll call the Emmelines and tell them what happened." "Sheriff, Mrs. Emmeline is the one who called about her daughter last month. Callie Emmeline was placed on a psychiatric hold after her mom called us. I found her on this very road." "Yes, right. I remember." "I know Catherine Emmeline. She says Callie has night terrors. Doesn't it seem odd that she basically sleepwalked here once before and now her brother is dead in the same spot?" Moore nodded once. "The odd factors we can piece together at the station." Moore retreated to his car with the note, Wright glaring at him as he went. He folded the paper slowly in the driver's seat, waved Wright back into her car, and mouthed, "Go on." The ambulance pulled out. No sirens. Wright rolled down her window as she approached Moore's car, but he held his phone up to his ear. She scoffed and tore back up Roland Road in a nebula of red dust. Her voice crackled through the radio in Moore's cruiser. "I know you don't care about this town anymore, Sheriff, but I'm going to do some digging before another person gets hurt." To this, Moore only laughed, a wheezy sound that he didn't bother to share over the radio. He would wait for the tow truck. In the meantime, he opened his center console and slid the note next to an orange bottle of Klonopin. At least he would have something to dull his mind in the next 60 to 90 minutes. As his vision blurred, he glanced in his rearview mirror down at Red Door House. He squinted to see any movement, but was too stoned to tell. The tow truck sent a text message revealing an ETA of 5 minutes. Moore spaced out on the phone's screen when he saw a flashing light. A glimpse of red flared in his side mirror around the area of the porch. "Calvin Moore," Red Door House whispered. "Won't you come and pay a visit again?" I am irresistible. My brown shingles, pale exterior, ruby door. Everybody in Staywhile is curious about me. Some argue my last tenant's notoriety caused my fame, but that isn't true. I recognize the talent to move past the physical boundaries that most insignificant humans can't see past. Axel Nieram's magic permeated my walls when he came to live in me. With every person he killed, parts of each victim bled into me. He fed me their souls. But there is no immortality like a house's hunger. I have many rooms, many needs. I want a family to grace my halls. I know exactly the talent who can give it to me. There was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed infant girl who Nieram brought to me. Even then her powers were strong, and she managed to summon an outside source to help her escape. Callie Emmeline won't get away this time. Everyone left in Staywhile from that fateful night Nieram was caught bringing me Callie will come to me once more. Now that Cole Emmeline is dead, I have something of Callie's she won't be able to ignore. And this time, all the players will be under my command. I'll give Callie another dream, so haunting she'll have to go looking for her brother. Lightning strikes Staywhile Chapel's rusted finial. Muffled pipe organ music leaks from the roof. Callie's mother bursts out the back door and sees Callie's astral form gliding forward. "Where have you been?" Mrs. Emmeline asks, beckoning Callie inside. Mrs. Emmeline pushes Callie to a mirror to reveal her reflection, adorned in a beaded white gown. "Mama," Callie says, "who am I marrying?" Mrs. Emmeline unearths white tulle from a drawer and veils Callie's head. "I don't know, Cal," she says. They go back outside. The storm worsens. Sheets of rain pelt them as they cut across the side yard. Callie trips over a tombstone. Its name, Cole Emmeline. She tries to tell her mother, but a continuous car horn replaces her voice. Her footsteps crunch as if broken glass litters the chapel steps as they ascend. Mrs. Emmeline straightens Callie's soaked dress. "I almost forgot," her mother shouts over the wind. She produces a bottle of perfume and spritzes Callie with a floral wall. Freesia, rose, and orchids drizzled with honey and burned in sandalwood. Mrs. Emmeline vanishes as the evening's first clap of thunder. A silver cord connected to Callie's solar plexus grows taut between the doors and pulls her in as they open. Hundreds of aging pugs, copies of her dog, Aggie, sit in the pews wearing tuxedos and gowns, watching her. She slides towards the altar, where an unrecognizable priest waits, smiling at her. Gesturing to the crowd, the hounds fall silent at his command. "Dearly beloved," the priest starts, "we've gathered to make an offering." The pugs howl with frothy jowls in response. Their brown eyes slant defiantly in frenzied yellow glow. Paws scrape over the wooden pews. The priest walks behind the altar. Callie attempts to free her paralyzed body in vain. "Callie, your brother Cole has something to say," says the priest. A white casket appears before the altar. The priest rolls up his sleeves, exposing many tattoos, and opens the top panel. He tightens his grip on Callie's silver cord and twists it around her like an ephemeral boa constrictor. With each beat of her heart, the cord tightens. "Come, hold your brother's hand, Callie," he says. He's taking his last breath. Callie crashes down to a kneeling stance as the priest tugs on her cord. She uses a casket handle to raise herself, but is unable to face its contents. "Look at him," the priest whispers. Callie catches a glimpse of the priest. Her dream self attempts to associate him with waking memory. Memory trickles the hairs in her nose like gunpowder, and tastes of revenge. I don't want her to remember Niram yet, so I give her another distraction. A voice inside the casket. "Callie." Her brother, as a toddler, lays in the adult-sized casket. His hair is reverted to platinum blonde, that eventually darkened in puberty. Shattered glass litters the casket's white interior and over his suited body. The icy blue irises of his watching eyes grow over the white until they are vacant blue spheres. "You will have a child who looks just like me soon," Cole says. "Do you understand?" "I do," Callie says. She pulls glass shards off Cole, cutting her fingers in the process. Her blood sends tiny splatters across the white satin lining. The dogs storm out of the pews, crowd to the altar, and pile onto Callie. They tear her dress and breathe musty huffs around her. "If any man here has any objections," the priest continues, "speak now or forever hold." The entrance doors burst open. Leaves and rain fly inside. A short silhouette stumbles toward them. "Jasper Cooney, are you here to object?" the priest asks. Jasper, from Callie's senior homeroom, arrives out of breath. From the casket, Cole grabs Callie's arm and pulls her close. "Afraid?" Jasper smiles at the priest, like the man is his savior. "No, Father," Jasper says. "I've just come to bring the news. The first stage is done." He addresses Callie. I'm so happy for you. Two dogs bite her ankles and hold fast. Jasper and the priest wrap the silver cord around her legs and tie her wrists together. She still cannot move or scream. The casket's white satin grows red as her blood stains spread. Cole's pillow changes to door panels as the lining transforms into my red front door, stark against the white varnished pine. The door opens into a dark space where Cole falls down. The priest scoops up Callie's restrained body and throws her in after her brother. Callie's cord unravels, and she spins into blackness. After a dizzying freefall, she is suspended in the dark. My red door slams shut, closed horizontally overhead. Through the crack, the cord is wound around my knob. I've got her now. Deputy Wright was waiting for more when he returned to the station. He avoided her eyes and moved past her, but she followed. "Sheriff, we need to talk," Wright began. Moore gestured to the break room. He sifted the remaining coffee, a crescent of grounds at the bottom of the pot, dumping the rest into his cup. "We did talk, Wright." "There's something else, Sheriff, please." "We just found the body of a kid who's barely an adult. I know this is a big deal, Wright, but I haven't had any decent sleep all week." "You must know what I'm thinking, then," Wright said. She waited. Moore did know. When Cole was in preschool, a nasty shootout happened at the Red Door house. Bodies were discovered on the property, and Niram was killed on the scene. Wright continued. "Folks are already making theories. Maybe someone is following in Niram's footsteps, luring people to the house, killing youth, using the scene of the previous crime. Who knows what could have happened to Callie?" "There's no cult in Staywile," Moore said. "There wasn't one when Axel Niram was here, and there isn't one now. Kids make up tall tales, but what we found was just carnage. Niram was a serial killer, not some warlock or whatever." "But there's talk. You were there when they cornered him. Why did so many of your team resign after that night?" "People leave the service every day." "True. But there was more than murder happening at that house. Occult paraphernalia, writing on the walls, animal body parts. Niram was going about his killings differently than an average murderer. He was ritualistic. I shouldn't have to repeat it, but I guess I have to since you don't seem to be paying attention. Cole was Callie Emmeline's brother. She is the most vulnerable person in Staywile in this scenario. And the case files say that they found her on the scene that night." Moore slammed his cup against the counter. "How dare you go into my files, Wright? Callie Emmeline was fortunate enough to be a baby when all that happened. She doesn't remember. I'd much prefer if I didn't remember either. Do you have any idea of the aftermath? How we have to keep constant patrol on that damn house because kids go in there and do God knows what?" "There wasn't a patrol tonight," Wright challenged. "Seems like a good chance for someone to slip in and execute foul play while the cops have their heads turned." "Don't try it, Wright," Moore warned. "Were you there when we searched Niram's house?" "No." "Do something else to prove yourself, but not this. Got it?" The last drops of coffee sizzled onto the percolator's hot plate and permeated the silence. "Sheriff," Wright said, attempting to even her voice, "all I'm asking is for you to acknowledge the possibility that something other than a freak accident just happened." "You're letting gossip bias you, Deputy," Moore said. He threw his cup in the trash and stormed out. Moore locked his office door behind him. Memories of Red Door House intruded on his thoughts, which he normally would numb away. However, given the impending investigation, he couldn't use again. Red Door House haunted him. Its rancid smell of decay, symbols written in black Sharpie next to brown smears of dried blood all over the walls. Most people didn't talk about Axel Niram or his rotten house anymore, except for the kids. Now one of those kids is dead, and he'd have to pick up the pieces yet again. Maybe Cole's girlfriend will come to the funeral today, Callie thought. Staywhile Chapel was packed 2 days after the accident. Relatives in black filled the pews with the remaining places occupied by former teachers and neighbors. Quiet notes of an electric organ softly penetrated the shocked air. A white casket sat open at the end of the aisle, surrounded by ivory bouquets and wreaths. It's weird Cole never introduced us to her, Callie thought. But he must have been seeing someone if he wrote a note to her. The immediate family sat up front. Mr. Emmeline stared blankly at his son's remains, and Mrs. Emmeline cried soundless tears of a shocked mother. Callie Emmeline sat with her older service dog, Aggie, asleep in her lap. Callie couldn't cry. All she could do was look away from her brother's body and wonder if anyone else believed he had taken his own life. As the last attendees filed in, Pastor Glenn mounted his podium. He nodded at the Emmelines and took a readying breath, but was interrupted by the arrival of a latecomer. All heads turned as a woman entered, their gazes following her as she reached the pew behind the Emmelines. She shuffled and sat behind Mrs. Emmeline. An opaque veil completely concealed her face. It's heartening to see so many faces here to celebrate Cole, Pastor Glenn began. Just looking into this room is a testament to just how loved this young man was. The pew creaked as the woman slid forward and rested her elbows on the Emmeline's row. Aggie stirred in Callie's lap. Callie stroked the dog's head as her eyes fluttered in her sleep. I can't think of a greater tragedy than a young person going before their time. But if there's one thing that I know as a man of God, it's that he works in mysterious ways. Mrs. Emmeline broke into a fresh sob. Mr. Emmeline wrapped a supporting arm around her, but kept his gaze on the pastor, imploring him to continue. I can't say I understand why this happened, Pastor Glenn said, but the best we can do is honor Cole today and give support to his family. The woman leaned closer to the Emmelines, her veil's tulle becoming visible in Callie's peripheral vision. She gripped Aggie tighter. Elizabeth Arden, the woman whispered. Mrs. Emmeline turned and chuckled exasperatedly. Yes, she said. Red door. Red door, the woman repeated. Aggie woke and stared at the woman, her veiled head reflecting in the dog's brown eyes. Callie met her mother's gaze. Recognition flooded her face like anger. Her red eyes searched in the veil as if the woman's name would be stitched somewhere in the fabric. Red door, the woman said, louder this time. Mr. Emmeline turned irritably. Aggie whimpered and pawed at Callie's dress. Red door, the woman shouted. Aggie barked at the woman. The hair along her spine stood in defense. Hey now, Pastor Glenn said, sounding far away. Red door! The color drained from Mrs. Emmeline's face. A grimace of fear pinched her face as her eyes welled with fresh tears. What are you trying to do? Mr. Emmeline shouted. Red door! The woman screamed. She stood and climbed over the surrounding spectators, clawing her way out. Mr. Emmeline reached for her, but she slipped out of the pew and slipped into the aisle. Aggie howled at the excitement and leaped from Callie's lap. The woman darted for the door on the other side of the church, Aggie scrambling after her. Stop! Mr. Emmeline called. Callie chased after Aggie with the hope that she would reach the dog before getting close to the woman. Her veil swooped over her head as she crossed the threshold leading out. While her face was turned, matted locks of bleach blonde hair showed in the veil's absence. Callie stood in the threshold as Aggie clambered down the steps and onto the grass of Staywhile Chapel's small graveyard. People stood up behind her, and her father's voice grew closer. The woman was already gone. Prone to running off, Aggie was nowhere to be seen either. Instead, among the markers, her classmate Jasper Cooney, standing in front of the freshly dug grave. He says to have sweet dreams tonight, Jasper said, grinning. The boy jumped into the grave and disappeared. Callie watched as the hole imploded and fresh tufts of grass grew in its place. Mr. Emmeline came to the threshold and grabbed Callie's shoulders, shaking her. No one else saw Jasper. "What the hell is the matter with you, Callie?" Mr. Emmeline shouted. A blue vein popped out of his forehead. "I was trying to catch her," Callie said, confused. "Who?" Mr. Emmeline barked. He gripped her tighter. Callie noticed the scratchy feeling of tulle on her fingers. She looked down and saw the woman's black veil in her hands. "Cole's girlfriend," she replied. Everyone watched behind her father. Some wore disgusted grimaces at the unruly younger sister who ruined her brother's funeral. Others looked just as scared as she must have. "Sheriff, this is right. Do you copy?" Moore jerked awake in his cruiser parked on Roland Road. The receiver revealed the time, 3 a.m. He sluggishly took the microphone. "Copyright. I need you to get down to Staywile Chapel. Cole Emmeline's grave has been desecrated." "Desecrated how?" "Someone stole the body." Wright's flashlight beam cut through the graveyard. As Moore approached, he noticed the fresh tuft, planted earlier that day, had been ripped from the ground, 2 mounds piled on either side. Inside, the casket was open and empty. "Where were you just now?" Wright asked. "At the station," Moore said. "Then why were you in your car?" The sound of soil crumbling on the sides of the grave interrupted them. Wright acted fast and pointed her flashlight down. She screamed. A large hand engraved in ink reached for the opening edge of the grave. The resurrected Axel Needham, clad in the vestments of a priest, pulled himself out. Wright went for her gun, but Needham smacked her with a rock. As she hit the ground, Moore felt relief trickle into his tense extremities, like the first effects of opiates. "Please forgive me," Moore said. "You can make it up to me, Sheriff," Needham said. "Anything you want." "Can you give me a lift?" Callie followed the sound of Cole's voice into the bathroom. "Don't turn on the light," he said. Outlined in the mirror, a silhouette stood still. She squinted, but couldn't find any more details. The figure seemed only visible when not looking directly at it. It held its hand up to the glass. "They're taking my body to Red Door." "Who?" Callie asked. "Needham. He's back." A different voice rose from the drain, sensual and teasing. Callie remembered the dreams she had of Red Door House. "Won't you come and pay me a visit again?" she asked. Callie snapped on the light. The mirror reflected only her. A spider crawled out of the sink's drain. Callie grabbed a hand towel and watched as the arachnid slinked up the concave curve and onto the counter. She bit her lip in concentration, wadded the towel, and brought it down fast. It mangled the spider, with its inside spread like bird droppings. One leg twitched, but Callie couldn't bring herself to hit it again. Dozens of tiny spiders were balled into fetal positions and spread around their mother. Some of them attempted to crawl away, but most of them were not moving at all. "What do you want from us?" Callie shouted. "One last dream." Callie's astral form descended noiselessly toward Red Door House. A raging fire in the empty swimming pool held gargantuan flames, reaching past the roof's height. A circle, embellished in spray-painted stars, was cut into the backyard's grass. 3 red-cloaked figures guarded the circle's circumference. Inside, a black sheet covered a splayed form. Callie crouched by the edge of the roof. The figures' faces clarified in her proximity. Sheriff Moore's sunken face looked skeletal, limbed in the firelight. Adjacent was the woman from Cole's funeral, unveiled. The leader had his hood drawn and his back to Callie. Tattoos covered the rest of his neck and continued under his cloak. Like the woman, his hair was bleached and fried to the root. He raised his hands over the covered figure and spoke. "We come forth to perform this rite of necromancy. The participants have fasted for the last 9 days. We each have donned an article of the deceased's clothes. We are, symbolically, as dead as the individual before us." Burning orange tongues behind them licked the night, hungry for propitiation. The trio chanted in unison. "All dark lords and demons that pray, mingle who may, around and about, a world within and our world without. Let evil come in, and goodness stay out." The leader stomped his foot. The bonfire flames extended, forming homunculi shapes. They weaved around each other, gaining speed. The blurred creatures formed a ring and finally split into the image of a cobra. The group disrobed, exposing themselves. Each wore one piece of an entire outfit. Unbuttoned tuxedo pants stopped at the leader's ankles. The woman wore a matching tuxedo shirt. More sported shined Oxfords. "Those are Cole's," Callie thought. "We face thee corpse to the rising sun so that you too may rise again," the leader continued. "By the virtue of resurrection and the agonies of the dam, I conjure thee, Cole Emmeline, obey these unholy rites. I charge thee to rise. Rise!" the group shouted. They pulled the sheet off Cole's body. Naked, his arms reached the perimeter of the circle, palms up. A long T-shaped scar ran down his chest to his stomach. The bonfire snake elongated into a thin figure, widening with every flicker. Its arms and legs grew and stretched as if in acquiescence, drawing more detail. A yellow face silently screamed in its birth, manifesting into the likeness of her brother. Cole's spirit came forward, dripping sparks. The flame shrunk back into the concave space as the spirit sprinted to its body. Disembodied bleating trilled as the formed flames crashed down. The group joined hands and breathed deep, synchronized gasps. Their knees buckled, and they fell to a kneeling stance around the circle. Cole's belly rose and fell. The seam of his autopsy scar stretched as the conducted breaths entered him. Finally, he rose. "Spirit of Cole Emmeline," the leader said, "I command thee to respond to our demands. I, Axel Neram, have returned from the under to wreak vengeance on the town that wished to silence me. Will you aid in my revenge?" Cole dug his fingers into his eyes and tore out the spiky contacts the coroner used to close them forever. He faced the trio with ripped eyelids and hollow sockets. Sucked air diluted his voice as if he were inhaling while speaking. "You are damned. You think you work in a place of invincibility, but the divine know your motives." "You think you can fight me, Spirit?" Neram challenged. "We have your heart in this box." His partner produced a small box from the grass. A pair of scissors balanced on the lid. Neram gestured back to the dying embers in the empty pool. The flames grew as if someone blew on their ashes. "Should you disobey me, your soul will be locked in my control. I will sever the tie with these shears of eternity." "Not before I bring you back with me." Cole's body crouched in a combat stance. He struck his fist into the center of the circle, and lush grass grew back in the sparse space. Afraid, the woman dropped the box and scissors. More backed away, breaking the circle. Cole reached for the scissors, but Neram was too fast. He stabbed the shears into Cole's incision and dragged them down. Molten red embers spilled from Cole's mouth, as Niram sliced him open. "Cole!" Callie screamed. Her hand slapped over her mouth, but it was too late. They had heard her. Niram met Callie's gaze. He reached into the cavity in Cole's body and pulled out a silver object before dropping him to the ground. "Miss Emmeline, I knew you would come." Callie sank through the roof and crashed onto the floor. Moore and the blonde woman restrained her. Niram pried her mouth open and held the silver object from Cole's body above her gaping mouth. Callie recognized it, the obscene ornament that hung from the back of Cole's truck. "By the power of all unnatural forces, I consummate this unholy rite. From this innocent and obscene child shall grow within." Cracking wood echoed through the unfurnished space as Deputy Wright broke down the front door. She entered, brandishing her gun, and shot Niram. The bullet pierced his hand. He cried out and dropped the silver testicles, where they shattered on the floor like eggshells. Among the pieces was a squirming, amorphous fetus. It turned its head, and legs grew from its body as it transformed into the spider from Callie's sink. Deputy Wright shot the woman who had been at Cole's funeral. Her body splayed over Callie. Officer Moore tackled Wright and reached for her gun. "You knew this whole time," Wright grunted, more a statement than a question. "This is what happens when you play the hero and stay while Wright," Moore shouted back. "Red Door follows through. She always gets whoever's in her way." Stray bullets shot blindly at the walls. They penetrated Red Door House, but the pain was transferred to Callie. She screamed as if she were the one being shot. "I'll follow through this time," Wright argued. "This ends tonight." But the wrestling pair of Moore and Deputy Wright sank into the floor, the cheap tiles becoming quicksand. Red Door swallowed Niram's partner after them. Pain immobilized Callie. Movement outside caught her eye. Niram stood at the pool's edge, opening a replica of the red front door and stepping inside. Callie's jaw fell in disbelief, allowing the creature to jump into her mouth. It tasted sour as it slid down her throat. The walls spoke to her. "Welcome home," Red Door House said. Something kicked inside Callie's stomach, and she began to scream.